It was an ordinary morning in our quiet neighborhood, the kind of calm that makes you forget the world outside until it doesn't. I grabbed my fishing gear, ready for some peaceful hours by the lake. This wasn't just any lake. It was my secret haven, my escape from daily chaos. What nobody knew was that I owned this lake and the land around it, quietly, legally, and without any fuss. The lake shimmered under the gentle sunlight, reflecting the clear blue sky. I set up my spot near the edge, baited my hook, and cast my line with practiced ease. The water rippled softly, the only sound besides distant birdsong. I felt at peace. Then came Karen. Karen was the HOA's self-appointed rule enforcer. If anyone in the neighborhood had a problem with something, Karen was already there, ready to throw a fit. She dressed sharply, but her sharp tongue was what everyone really noticed. I'd heard stories about her complaints, everything from landscaping to parking, and now apparently fishing. I barely had time to reel in a bite when Karen stormed out of her house, eyes blazing. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, voice loud enough to carry across the water. "You can't just fish here without a permit. This is HOA property." I smiled, holding my calm like a shield. "Actually, Karen, this lake and its banks belong to me. The HOA has no authority here." Her jaw dropped. For a moment, I saw confusion crack her usually fierce expression. "No way," she said, stepping closer, voice rising. "Everyone here follows HOA rules. You can't just ignore them." That's when things got interesting. I reached into my backpack and pulled out the documents, the legal deeds proving my ownership. She stared at the papers, her eyes flicking back and forth, unable to argue with the facts. Around us, a few neighbors had gathered, sensing something unusual was unfolding. Karen's face twisted, a mix of embarrassment and fury. "This can't be real. I'm going to report this. You're breaking the rules." "I'm just enjoying my property," I said, steady as ever. Karen stormed off, muttering threats under her breath, but I knew this was far from over. She didn't understand the full story yet, and I had no intention of letting her or the HOA bully me. Over the next few days, her complaints escalated. She sent emails to the HOA board, posted on the neighborhood group chat, and even tried to get other residents to support her cause. But no one had any idea that the lake was privately owned by me, a fact I kept close to the chest until now. Little did Karen know, I had been preparing for this moment for a while. The quiet lake was about to become the center of the biggest HOA showdown our neighborhood had ever seen. As the sun set that evening, I sat by the water's edge, thinking about how to outsmart Karen's endless meddling. The lake was peaceful now, but the storm was coming and I was ready. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with whispers about the lake drama. Karen had been on a relentless mission, emails flying back and forth, texts to board members, and even phone calls to the HOA lawyer. She was determined to prove I was breaking the rules and to get me off her lake. But I wasn't worried. I had something more powerful than angry complaints. The truth, backed by paperwork and a plan. That day, as I was walking toward the lake, I noticed a few neighbors watching with curious eyes. Some seemed confused. Others clearly sided with Karen, but most were simply waiting to see what would happen next. Karen, however, took things further. She posted a stern warning on the neighborhood social media page, accusing me of trespassing and ignoring community guidelines. Her message was filled with threats of legal action and demands to stop fishing immediately. But here's the thing. She had no idea what was really going on. Behind the scenes, I'd hired a property surveyor weeks earlier. The survey confirmed everything. The lake, the banks, even the small dock I'd built years ago, were all on my private property. That document was my secret weapon. I decided it was time to play my cards. I invited the HOA board members for a friendly fishing day at the lake, of course. Karen was furious when she heard about it. She tried to cancel the event, claiming it was illegal. But the board, curious and maybe a little skeptical of Karen's relentless anger, accepted the invitation. On the day of the event, the sun was shining, the water was calm, and the atmosphere was surprisingly peaceful. I greeted the board and a few neighbors with coffee and snacks, keeping everything casual. We fished, laughed, and talked. But beneath the surface, I was preparing for the real moment. After some light conversation, I pulled out the survey results and legal papers, handing copies to each board member. The room fell silent. One by one, they flipped through the documents, their expressions shifting from doubt to surprise. Karen's face went from smug to pale. She stammered, "This can't be. How did you get all this?" I smiled quietly. "I've owned this property for years. I just kept it low-key. I'm happy to share it with the community, but I won't let false claims stop me from enjoying what's mine." The board members exchanged glances. Some quietly admitted they hadn't realized the truth. Others apologized for taking sides so quickly. Karen tried to argue, but with the proof in front of everyone, her words lost power. She looked defeated, but still stubborn. As the event ended, I could tell Karen was plotting her next move, but the tide had shifted. That day, the community saw a different side of the lake, not a place of conflict, but one of possibility. And for me, it was just the beginning of reclaiming what was mine, while outsmarting the HOA's fiercest critic. After that peaceful fishing day, I thought things might settle down, but Karen wasn't ready to back off. If anything, she became more obsessed, her every move fueled by frustration and a bruised ego. It was clear she wanted to take control, no matter the cost. Days later, I noticed signs posted around the neighborhood, warning residents to stay away from private property, with bold letters threatening fines and legal action. The HOA board claimed these were precautionary, but we all knew who was behind it. Karen had rallied a small group of supporters, trying to paint me as the troublemaker, the person causing division in the community. But what she didn't count on was how the neighbors had started to question her motives. One afternoon, I was at the lake again, enjoying the calm, when Karen and a few of her friends approached. She had a clipboard and a determined look, ready to confront me once more. "Stop fishing here," she snapped. "We've had enough. You're causing problems." I calmly stood my ground. "Karen, the lake is mine. I'm within my rights. Why don't you try seeing things from my side for once?" She scoffed, but before she could reply, a neighbor stepped forward, Mrs. Thompson, a longtime resident with no patience for drama. "Karen, maybe it's time to let this go. You've stirred up the whole neighborhood over a lake that's not even HOA property." Karen's face flushed, but she tried to regain control. "This isn't over." That evening, I received a formal letter from the HOA, a demand to stop all unauthorized activities on the lake, threatening fines and legal action. The irony was thick. I had all the legal proof, yet they were trying to bully me. Instead of reacting with anger, I saw an opportunity. I called a neighborhood meeting and invited everyone, HOA members, neighbors, even Karen's supporters. I wanted transparency and to clear the air once and for all. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. I presented all my documents again, showing ownership of the lake and surrounding land. I explained my plans to keep the area beautiful and open for peaceful activities, inviting neighbors to enjoy it responsibly. The room was silent. Some faces showed surprise, others admiration. Even a few HOA members admitted they hadn't known the full story. Karen tried to interrupt, but this time, the room was not on her side. One by one, neighbors voiced their support for me, praising my openness and respect for the community. The climax came when the HOA president spoke up, acknowledging their mistake in trying to enforce rules on private property. He promised to freeze any action against me and work with me going forward. Karen's jaw dropped. For the first time, she was speechless in front of the entire neighborhood. That night, I realized that owning the lake was not just about property, it was about respect, community, and standing up for what's right without losing your calm. Karen lost her grip on power, and the lake became a symbol of unity rather than conflict. After the community meeting, I thought the worst was behind me. The HOA board had backed down. The neighborhood was starting to heal, and the lake finally felt like a shared treasure rather than a battleground. But Karen had other plans, and she was nowhere near ready to admit defeat. About a week later, I arrived at the lake early in the morning, ready for some quiet fishing, only to find bright orange "no trespassing" signs planted all around. The banks, these weren't from the HOA. These signs looked official, as if placed by some legal authority. My heart sank for a moment, but I knew better. Someone was trying to intimidate me, and the neighbors who had begun to enjoy the lake. I took photos and immediately reached out to my lawyer. As it turned out, Karen had gone behind everyone's back and filed a complaint with the county, claiming the lake was public property and that I was illegally restricting access. She'd even convinced a few local officials to investigate. The tension in the neighborhood thickened. Rumors spread fast. Some residents began to question me again. Others took sides, and Karen's followers grew bolder. But I wasn't about to let things spiral out of control. That same week, I organized a neighborhood cleanup day by the lake. I invited everyone, including Karen. I sent personal invites, emphasizing the chance to come together and care for the place rather than fight over it. Karen didn't respond, but many neighbors showed up, pitching in with trash bags, rakes, and good spirits. The lake sparkled by the end of the day, and laughter replaced the usual heated arguments. The turning point came when Karen herself unexpectedly appeared, carrying a bucket and gloves. The crowd went quiet, eyes on her. She looked around, the tension visible on her face, but then, slowly, she started picking up trash. No words, no accusations, just action. After a while, she spoke softly. "Maybe I was wrong to push so hard. This lake means a lot to all of us, and maybe it's time I stopped seeing it as a battle." Her words caught everyone off guard. The neighbors exchanged looks of surprise and cautious hope. I walked over, extending a hand. "Glad to have you here, Karen." She hesitated, then shook it. For the first time, there was a sense of truce. But just when everyone thought peace had finally arrived, the county officials showed up the next day with papers, a legal notice demanding a temporary halt on all lake activities until the dispute was resolved. Karen smiled smugly. "Looks like the law is finally on my side." The neighborhood's mood darkened. Was the fight really over, or just beginning? I stared at the papers and then at the lake, my lake. I realized that winning this battle wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight smart, with patience and proof, not just anger. Because this lake was more than water and land. It was my home, my peace, and the place where I outsmarted even the fiercest HOA critic. And this story, it was far from over. The legal notice from the county hit the neighborhood like a thunderclap. Suddenly, the peaceful lake was off limits. No fishing, no gathering, no relaxing by the water. The county said the dispute over property boundaries and public access needed official resolution, which could drag on for months, maybe years. Karen wore a victorious smile, convinced she had finally won. The neighbors were split, some frustrated by the ban, others whispering about rules and order. The lake had gone from a source of joy to a battlefield, but behind the scenes, I was quietly working on my next move. First, I contacted my lawyer and local officials, providing detailed proof of ownership, past surveys, tax documents, and photos showing exclusive use of the lake for years. I wanted to show the county that the facts were clear. This was private property, and the HOA had no say. Meanwhile, I reached out to the neighborhood through a handwritten letter, explaining the situation, sharing my side, and asking for support and patience. I made it clear I wasn't against anyone. I just wanted what was rightfully mine, and for everyone to eventually enjoy the lake peacefully. The letter struck a chord. Messages of encouragement flooded in. People remembered the fun fishing days, the community cleanups, and how the lake had always been a place to relax and connect. Karen's harsh tone suddenly felt out of place. Then came the big day, a county hearing to decide the lake's status. The room was packed. Karen and her supporters showed up confident, armed with claims and complaints. I brought my evidence, witnesses from the neighborhood, and my calm determination. As the hearing unfolded, it became clear the facts spoke louder than opinions. The legal documents, the surveyor's testimony, and neighbors vouching for years of my ownership made a powerful case. Karen's arguments began to crumble under scrutiny. Her accusations of public misuse and HOA rights were refuted one by one. Finally, the judge made the decision. The lake and surrounding banks were private property. The county had no jurisdiction to restrict my rights. The HOA's attempts to control the lake were invalid. The room buzzed. I felt a wave of relief and quiet satisfaction. Karen sat stunned, unable to hide her shock. The same fierce woman who had pushed so hard now looked defeated. But here's the twist. Instead of escalating further, I reached out to Karen after the hearing. I offered to work together, to keep the peace and respect the community. It wasn't easy at first. Karen was stubborn, but slowly she began to see the benefits of cooperation over conflict. The neighborhood healed, the lake reopened, and peace returned. I still cast my line there, but now with neighbors, even Karen occasionally joining. This lake had taught me something valuable. Sometimes, the best way to outsmart your toughest critic isn't just with proof or fights, but with patience, respect, and a little grace. And that's how I won the battle, kept my lake, and turned an HOA nightmare into a community story worth sharing. With the legal battle behind us and the lake finally peaceful, again, I took some time to reflect on everything that had happened. What started as a simple day of fishing had turned into a full-on community drama, testing patience, courage, and the power of standing your ground. The neighborhood was quieter now. Conversations replaced arguments, and the lake had regained its role as a place of calm and connection. I often found myself sitting on the dock in the evenings, watching the sunset ripple across the water, thinking about how close things had come to falling apart. Karen and I never became friends, but something shifted. The endless fights gave way to a cautious respect. She stopped showing up with complaints and even nodded politely when we crossed paths. It wasn't a perfect peace, but it was progress. I realized this whole experience wasn't just about property or rules. It was about understanding boundaries, personal, legal, and social. How easy it is for pride and anger to blind us, and how much stronger we are when we listen and find common ground. That afternoon, a surprise visitor arrived. The HOA president. He came with a sincere apology for how things had been handled, and a proposal. Instead of battles, the HOA wanted to work with me on maintaining the lake area, keeping it beautiful, and organizing occasional community events there. It was an olive branch. I gladly accepted. Over time, the lake became more than just my property. It grew into a shared space, a symbol of compromise and community spirit. But just when I thought the story was over, the unexpected happened. One early morning, I found a small boat tied to the dock, with a note attached. It was from Karen. The note read, "Maybe I was wrong to fight so hard. This lake belongs to all of us, and maybe it's time I learned to enjoy it instead of control it." Karen inside the boat was a fishing rod and a cooler filled with ice-cold drinks. An invitation to join her next fishing trip. I smiled. After all the chaos, the fights, and the tension, maybe this was the real victory, turning an enemy into a neighbor. So I picked up the fishing rod, grabbed a drink, and got ready to cast my line again. This time, not just for fish, but for a fresh start. After receiving Karen's unexpected note and fishing invitation, I wasn't sure what to expect. Over the years, our interactions had been filled with tension and suspicion, but her gesture felt sincere, and I decided to take a chance. The next weekend, I showed up at the lake just before dawn, Karen was already there, sitting quietly by the water's edge, rod in hand. For a moment, we just watched the sunrise in silence. The same lake, the same peaceful morning, but a different feeling in the air. As we began to fish, our conversation started cautiously. Karen admitted that she had let her pride and desire for control blind her to the real value of the lake, the community, and the moments of peace it brought. "I guess I lost sight of what mattered," she said quietly. "All I wanted was to protect what I thought was ours, but maybe I was just protecting myself." I shared my side too, how the battles weighed on me, but also how standing firm had brought unexpected friendships and new respect. As the morning passed, we laughed over small fish that got away, shared stories about neighbors, and even planned future events for the lake, picnics, cleanups, and fishing tournaments. Just as I began to believe the hardest chapter was behind us, a sudden shout broke the calm. From the far side of the lake, a group of new neighbors arrived, towing kayaks and bicycles, ready to explore and enjoy the lake. Among them was a young family with kids, full of energy and excitement. Karen and I exchanged looks. This was a new beginning, a chance to share the lake beyond old grudges and conflicts. But then, something caught my eye. A weathered old man standing near the shore, watching quietly. Later, I learned he was the original owner of the land. Before me, a neighbor who had lived there decades ago but had kept a low profile. He approached me with a knowing smile and a small, worn-out journal. "I've been watching how this lake brought a community back together," he said. "Here, take this. It's a piece of history, stories, and memories from years past. It belongs with someone who cares." Flipping through the journal, I found stories of laughter, struggle, and growth. Stories that reminded me how places like this aren't just about ownership, but about legacy. As I looked out at the lake, now alive with neighbors, kids playing, and quiet moments shared, I understood that this was more than a personal victory. It was a reminder that even the toughest battles can lead to unexpected friendships, new beginnings, and a stronger community. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest catch of all. Weeks passed since the old neighbor gifted me the journal. It became a cherished piece of our community story, a reminder of where we'd come from and the battles that shaped us. The lake, once a battleground, was now a place of peace and shared memories. Karen had truly changed. Our conversations were no longer tense but respectful and sometimes even friendly. We had found common ground, understanding that the lake belonged not just to one person, but to the whole neighborhood's spirit. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I was organizing a small gathering by the lake, neighbors bringing food, kids running barefoot, laughter floating in the air. Karen helped set up a small fire pit, and I noticed a softness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. As the night deepened, I stood up to say a few words. I spoke about the journey, the fights, the fears, the lessons learned. How the lake was more than land or water. It was a symbol of resilience, respect, and community. Then with a smile, I pulled out the old journal and shared a story from it, one about neighbors coming together during a storm decades ago, standing side by side to protect their homes and hopes. The crowd listened, captivated. It was clear the lake had become a place where old wounds healed, and new stories began. But just as the evening was winding down, Karen leaned over and whispered, "There's one more thing you should know." Curious, I followed her to the edge of the water where she pointed to a small wooden box half buried in the mud. Together, we pulled it out. Inside were letters, handwritten notes from the community, past and present, sealed with hopes for the future. One letter caught my eye. It was from Karen herself, written months ago, before the conflict escalated. In it, she confessed her fears of losing control, of change, and her desire to protect the neighborhood she loved, even if her methods were harsh. Reading it aloud, the crowd grew silent. Feeling the weight of her honesty, it was a reminder that beneath the anger and conflict, there were real people, real emotions, and real hopes. As we closed the box and placed it back by the lake, the night air seemed filled with possibility. The lake was no longer just mine, or Karen's, or the HOA's. It belonged to all of us. A living story of struggle, forgiveness, and community. And as I cast my line one last time that evening, I felt a quiet pride. Not just in winning the fight, but in how a lake had brought a whole neighborhood back together.